My parents told everyone I failed. I sat quietly at my brother's promotion banquet. Then his FIANCÉE looked at me and whispered, "Wait, you're Wesley Grant?" The room stopped. Even my father couldn't speak. It was a Tuesday morning when the envelope arrived, thick paper, wax seal, and my full name spelled out in gold script like it was the damn State of the Union. I knew right away it wasn't a bill or some startup pitch deck. No, this was family. And family, for me, meant trouble. My name is Wesley Grant. I'm 34 years old. I live in San Diego, not far from where the Air Force Base used to be, but far enough from my past. And as soon as I saw Lieutenant Commander Connor Grant, promotion banquet, I felt my stomach twist. Connor, the younger brother, the golden son, the Navy's rising star, decorated, charismatic, with a chin that could sell toothpaste. And me? I was the dropout, the one who left flight school midway through to chase what everyone thought was a pipe dream. When I left, the silence from my father was immediate and permanent. My dad was a military man, through and through. If you didn't finish what you started, you weren't a man, period. And when I turned in my wings, he never looked at me the same again, never called, never asked why, just pretended I didn't exist. My mom didn't ignore me outright, but sometimes I wish she had. She talked about me like I was a casualty of war. He's creative, she'd tell church friends. He's doing his own thing, like I was painting murals in alleyways instead of running an actual business. I could hear the pity in her voice every time she spoke my name, like she genuinely felt bad I hadn't followed the plan she and Dad laid out from birth. Connor, though, he never failed. Straight as, top of his class. Never missed a salute. I'd show up to family events and be greeted with, "Did you hear about Connor's commendation?" Or, "Your brother's on the fast track to command." I was the floater, the wanderer, the relative you make jokes about when they're not in the room. The kicker? They weren't wrong. For a while, I was floating. Startup to startup, dead-end aviation contracts, and a couch in a two-bedroom apartment I shared with an ex-Army engineer and a guy named Pete who sold drones on eBay. But all of that was a long time ago. Now, I own Glideline. We build humanitarian drone systems, not for war, not for surveillance, but for getting medical kits to flood zones and clean water to remote villages. We're in 7 countries, working with the UN and multiple NGOs. But none of that matters to my family. I might as well be assembling Lego kits for how seriously they take me. I stared at the invitation for a long time. The event was being held at the Liberty Ballroom in Coronado, all brass and mahogany and generals with 3 chins. I imagined walking in, getting the half-nod from my father, the once-over from my mother, and the back-patting sympathy of extended relatives. I imagined Connor surrounded by admirers while I held a gin and tonic in a corner. But then again, maybe that's exactly why I had to go. I tossed the envelope on my desk, rubbed my eyes, and whispered under my breath, "Screw it. I'm going." That Christmas was brutal, not because of the weather, we live in California, but because of the silence that wrapped around the living room every time I opened my mouth. The kind of silence where people look at their wine glasses instead of at you. I'd spent the last 8 months building something I was actually proud of, a prototype drone that could drop defibrillators in hard-to-reach places in under 4 minutes. Life-saving tech. We were already running test drops in the Sierra Nevada, and one of our early units had helped revive a hiker in Colorado. That meant something to me. It felt like the first time I wasn't just building something, I was changing something. So when I brought it up, when I said, "Actually, we just finished our first successful live test of the Medwing unit, hit the mark within a foot of target," I thought, maybe this time, they'd look up. Maybe my father would nod. Maybe Mom would ask a real question. Maybe Connor would say, "That's awesome, Wes." Instead, Dad grunted and reached for another deviled egg. Mom blinked at me and said, "Oh, that's nice, honey. So is it like Amazon delivery for emergencies?" Then she turned to my aunt and said, "Connor was just awarded the Navy Cross. Did I tell you? Saved 3 crewmen in an engine fire." The room shifted like it always did, all eyes moving to Connor as he shrugged, bashful but clearly enjoying the spotlight. He wore the uniform like it was made for him, and maybe it was. When he smiled, people wanted to listen. When he talked, people leaned in. I sat there on the edge of the sectional, my plate balanced on my knee, watching everyone toast him while my plate of cold ham and green bean casserole wilted in my lap. That moment stuck with me, not because they ignored my achievement. I was used to that, but because it made something clear. No matter what I built, no matter how many people my work helped, I would always be the other son. Later, when the aunts and uncles cleared out, Connor sat next to me in the den, drink in hand. "Hey, man," he said, clapping a hand on my shoulder. "I meant to tell you, that drone stuff is really cool. Very Silicon Valley." He smiled, the kind that made you feel like he was trying not to laugh. "Just make sure you've got a real business plan, yeah? Don't want you spinning your wheels on a hobby." It was always like that. A compliment with a twist, friendly on the surface, but a blade underneath. The kind of blade that tells you you'll never measure up, but hey, at least you tried. I wanted to say something back, that we'd signed a memo with Doctors Without Borders, that our wait list for units was growing, that real people were alive today because of what we'd built. But I didn't. I just nodded. That's what I'd learned to do around Connor. Nod and take it. Later that night, in the guest bedroom, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. The house was quiet, everyone asleep, and I kept hearing his voice. "Just make sure it's not a hobby." In that moment, I promised myself something. I wouldn't just make Glideline work. I'd make it undeniable. So undeniable that one day, even Connor wouldn't be able to dismiss it with a smirk and a pat on the shoulder. The place we started in didn't have heat. The first winter, we had to plug in space heaters just to keep the water pipes from freezing. The windows were double-paned in grime, and the only insulation came from leftover drywall stacked in the corners. But to me, it was beautiful. Our first workspace, a forgotten unit behind an old airport hangar near Chula Vista. You could hear the engines of commercial jets screaming down the runway while we soldered wires and argued over firmware. It smelled like rubber, dust, and stale burritos. But it was ours. We called the company Glideline. It wasn't flashy, but it said what we did: unmanned aerial systems that moved like silk and delivered like clockwork. My co-founder, Lena Cortez, used to say, "We're not here to win awards. We're here to save lives faster than bureaucracy can blink." Lena was a former Air Force engineer who got sick of politics and walked away from a pension to build this thing with me. She was the first person who didn't see me as a failed pilot. She saw me as someone with a vision worth backing. Back then, we worked on folding tables. We borrowed gear from old clients, scavenged busted drone shells from hobbyists, rewired motors we bought on Craigslist. There were nights we slept in the shop, curled up on yoga mats, debugging code until sunrise. I once blew out the power to the whole unit trying to install an experimental battery pack. Lena just laughed and handed me a flashlight. We built version after version, each one lighter, faster, smarter, and one day we got it right. We called it the Swiftwing. It could navigate between 2 GPS points with a margin of error under 6 inches. It could drop a sealed payload no larger than a shoebox into a 10 by 10 space in wind gusts up to 30 knots. And most importantly, it didn't cost a fortune. We were building for places no one else was: villages in the Amazon, flood zones in Southeast Asia, wildfire-ravaged towns in Northern California, places that didn't have helipads or paved roads or $10 million relief budgets. Our first contract was with a tiny clinic in rural Alaska. They needed insulin flown in twice a week when the roads iced over. Our drone got it there in under 10 minutes. I still remember the email. The clinic nurse said, "We used to lose patients every winter. Not this year." That message made everything worth it. After that, more started coming in. A disaster relief NGO in Honduras, a children's hospital in Kenya. Even FEMA reached out for a pilot program. The testimonials piled up. Villages that now had antibiotics. Camps that now had portable water filters. Entire populations connected by a humming little drone we had built with our bare hands. But you wouldn't know any of this if you listened to my parents. To them, Glideline was a startup project, a phase, a cute thing I was trying before I settled down. My mom would always ask if I had a backup plan. My dad didn't ask anything at all. Only Lena treated it like the revolution it was. Every time we got a new contract, she'd pop open a flat soda and toast me with, "To the people no one else delivers to." And every time I stared at the blueprints on the wall, scratched, stained, patched with tape, I felt something solid in my chest. They call me the floater. But here, in that cold, cluttered shop, I was flying. The Liberty Ballroom looked like something out of a movie: gleaming chandeliers, white-gloved servers, polished mahogany floors you could see your reflection in. And me, standing there in a tailored navy suit I paid for with my own money, feeling like a trespasser. I walked in alone, no date, no entourage. Just me and the invite I kept tucked in my breast pocket like a shield. It wasn't that I didn't know anyone. I knew too many. Old family friends, my father's retired Navy buddies, and a parade of officers who had probably shaken Connor's hand more times than they hugged their own sons. The moment I stepped in, I felt the shift, like someone opened a door to a cold room. "Wesley," my father said as I approached, standing near the check-in table. His voice was tight, the kind he used when he was deciding whether to shake your hand or salute you. "Dad," I replied, sticking mine out. He gave it a stiff shake, like I was a contractor he had to tolerate but didn't quite trust. "Glad you could make it," he said without a smile. "No, it's good to see you." "No, how have you been?" Then came my mother, lips pursed, hair sprayed into an inch of immobility. She glanced down at my tie and said, "That knot's too loose. It makes your collar look sloppy." "Good to see you too," I said, forcing a smile. The room buzzed with chatter, glasses clinking, metals glinting, women in glittering gowns and men in dress uniforms so sharp they could cut glass. Connor was already there, surrounded by a half-circle of admirers. He was laughing, nodding, patting shoulders, magnetic, like always. He wore his dress blues with all the metals polished, his posture perfect, a walking recruitment poster. As I approached the table reserved for family, someone clapped me on the back. "Uncle Steve." "Wes, you're here." He leaned in like we were war buddies. "Always loved your adventurous spirit." I gave him a half-smile. That's what they always called it, adventurous spirit. Code for guy who couldn't finish flight school. At the table, the conversation was already rolling, all centered on Connor. The promotion came so fast, my mother beamed. But then again, he's always been exceptional. She turned to me briefly. "Have you seen the cake? It's a little over the top, but Connor deserves it." "Of course he does," I murmured, taking a sip of water. Another aunt leaned over. So Wesley, what are you up to now? Still flying those little, what do you call them, gadgets? Drones, I said. Actually, well, it's wonderful that you're keeping busy, she said before turning back to Connor. So tell us about the training program you're leading. Sounds just amazing. I sat back, let it happen. The whole room revolved around him. Always had. I was just a background character, a footnote in the Grant family story. The waiter came by with champagne. I took 2 glasses. As the toast began, everyone stood. Connor beamed as Dad listed his achievements. Combat tours, rescue ops, leadership training. No mention of me, not even a nod. I raised my glass with everyone else, but it wasn't for the toast. It was to remind myself that I belonged here too. Not because they welcomed me, but because I earned my place in this room, in this life. They didn't have to see it. I'd build it anyway. Dinner was halfway through. My chicken was going cold while Connor told a story about extracting a stranded team during a monsoon. People laughed in all the right places, especially when he paused for dramatic effect. He always knew how to land a line like a punch. I was pushing my food around with my fork, pretending not to notice how I'd become a living place card. Just filling a seat, nothing more, when a soft voice broke through the low hum of conversation beside me. You're Wesley Grant, right? I turned. She sat across from me, slender, brunette, delicate features, but eyes that were alert and curious. She reached for her wine glass, but didn't take a sip, just stared at me like she was putting pieces together. I'm Amelia, she said with a warm smile. Connor's fiancée. I nodded, polite. Nice to meet you. But her smile didn't fade. Instead, her eyebrows drew together just a bit. Wait, sorry, I just realized something. Are you the Wesley Grant from Glideline? I blinked. Yes, I said slowly, unsure of where this was going. Her eyes widened. Oh my God, she whispered, then leaned in, dropping her voice further. You're that Wesley Grant? The clatter of forks and soft music filled the space between her words and the sudden pause that followed. She hadn't said it loud, but somehow it cut through the room like a sudden change in air pressure. My mother, mid-sentence, stopped. My father looked up. Connor's fork froze halfway to his mouth. You mean the company that does medical drones? Amelia said, oblivious to the ripple she had started. I read that article in Forbes. You guys worked with the relief teams in Nepal, didn't you? Every head at our table had turned by now. I nodded again. Yeah, that was us. Oh my God, she said again, now beaming. That system saved my cousin's village during the mudslides. Their hospital got cut off, and your drone was the only thing that got supplies in for 4 days. Her voice was soft but reverent, like she was talking to someone important, not just a name in a byline, but a face that had quietly altered her world. The air went still. No one said a word. Even Connor was silent, his expression unreadable. Amelia glanced around, her smile fading just a touch as she noticed the silence. Wait, did I say something wrong? I shook my head gently, keeping my voice steady. No, not at all. That moment, that single whispered realization, cracked open the room like a fault line. The myth of my irrelevance had just shattered, and there was no putting it back. It happened in slow motion, the unraveling. After Amelia's whisper, after the silence took hold, something shifted in her eyes. She looked at me again, not like a stranger, but like someone suddenly connecting a face to a life-altering story. She leaned forward. I didn't even realize that was you. When I read about Glideline, I pictured someone in a lab coat, not sitting here at a military banquet, she said, letting out a nervous laugh. Your tech literally kept my cousin alive. You should have seen the roads all gone. The drone came in twice a day, like clockwork. Her voice was loud enough now that the adjacent tables could hear. A few heads turned. Across the room, someone in a dress uniform paused their conversation. Connor cleared his throat. Babe, that was a team effort. She wasn't listening. No, I remember reading that Wesley started it from scratch, she said, smiling at me like we were old friends. Didn't you retrofit commercial drone parts to build your first system? I did, I replied quietly. We ran our first tests near the border. Just me and Lena, my co-founder. Amelia shook her head in amazement. Unbelievable. And now you're in Africa and Southeast Asia? That article said you've reached over 90,000 people, right? The number hung in the air like a flare. That was when my mother spoke. 90,000? Her voice was shaky, almost fragile. Everyone at the table turned toward her. Her wine glass trembled just slightly in her hand. I had no idea you were doing all of that, she said, blinking fast. I thought, well, I guess I didn't know what to think. My father said nothing, just stared at his plate. Then Amelia's mother, seated 2 seats down, chimed in. Glideline. I know that name. Didn't CNN do a segment on your company during the wildfires? They did, I said. We deployed 6 units to evacuate medicine after the road collapsed. And you don't work for a defense contractor? Someone else at the table asked, incredulous. No, we're civilian operated, entirely focused on humanitarian logistics. There was an awkward shuffle as people shifted in their seats, recognition dawning on their faces. Suddenly, I wasn't just Wesley, the dropout. I was Wesley Grant of Glideline, and the room didn't quite know how to process that. Then Amelia, voice still bright, added the final matchstick. We actually heard about you at the gala last month. Remember that, Mom? Admiral Whitmore made that joke about you. Some dropout who thinks drones can replace helicopters. She laughed. God, he looked like such an ass when someone corrected him. My father's face went pale. Amelia's laugh faded as she looked around. Oh, she said, glancing between me and my parents. You didn't know about that? I didn't speak. I didn't need to, because I knew what she'd just done. Without malice, without trying, she detonated the entire myth my parents had carefully constructed. The myth that I was struggling, that I was just playing around with machines while Connor rose through the ranks. The myth that their loyalty to him was justified because I had fallen short. Amelia turned to me, embarrassed. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make things awkward. I smiled softly. You didn't. I looked over at my father. His jaw was clenched, but his eyes were lost. My mother sat frozen, her hand still holding that wine glass like it might shatter if she moved. And for the first time in my life, I realized something. They weren't in control of the story anymore. Everyone at the table had just heard the truth, and none of them were looking at Connor. It was quiet now. Not the awkward kind, not the tense kind. It was that slow, creeping quiet that settles in when people realize they've misjudged something or someone. No one was eating. Forks hovered. Champagne flutes sat untouched. I could hear a jazz trio playing in the next room, muffled and irrelevant. I didn't stand up. I didn't raise my voice. I just sat there, calm as still water, and spoke like I was giving a weather report. We've reached 94,000 people so far, I said. Drones have been used to deliver anti-venom to rural Thailand, AEDs to islands off the coast of Colombia, and trauma kits to the backcountry in Montana. My father looked up, barely blinking. We just closed a funding round with Coastal Ventures, I continued. 50 million, Series C. I didn't say it to impress anyone. I said it because it was true. A soft gasp escaped from someone at the table. I think one of the Admiral's wives. But I didn't stop. We're working with the UN's Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs now, and we just signed a logistics partnership with World Central Kitchen to get supplies to disaster zones within 12 hours of impact. I looked directly at my mother. Her eyes were glossy, her mouth slightly open. I don't talk about it much, I said, because the work matters more than the credit. Connor shifted beside Amelia. His jaw flexed, but he didn't say a word. I didn't build glide line to be recognized, I added, letting my eyes travel across the table. But I also didn't build it to be dismissed. I took a sip of water, set the glass down, looked straight ahead. That was all. I was done. And yet, the air felt different now, lighter, like the pressure had broken. My father still hadn't spoken, but his hands were still. No clenched fists, no twitching brow, just still. My mother dabbed the corner of her eye with a cloth napkin and quickly set it back in her lap, pretending it wasn't happening. Connor? He looked gutted. His eyes didn't meet mine. He stared at the white linen in front of him like he was waiting for a lifeline to float past. But none came. There was no applause, no fanfare, just reality, laid bare on a dinner table dressed in ivory silk. I hadn't come here to embarrass anyone, but the truth had its own gravity, and tonight, it had finally pulled everything into place. No gloating, no anger, just peace. For once in my life, I didn't feel like I was trying to prove anything, because I didn't need to. It started with the voicemails. The banquet had ended with all the grace of a yacht running aground. No big confrontation, no shouting match, just stunned faces, watery eyes, and the quiet shuffle of chairs as people slipped out in small groups, pretending they hadn't just witnessed something tectonic. The next morning, I woke up to 5 missed calls and 3 voicemails from my mother. The first one was short. Hi, Wesley. Just calling to say, it was good seeing you last night. We didn't realize all the work you've been doing. Anyway, I hope you got home okay. Click. The second came a few hours later. More nervous. I hope we didn't come off cold. We were just surprised. Everything you said, it was impressive. I wish you'd told us sooner. Click. The third one hit different. She was trying. Fumbling, but trying. You've done something really meaningful, Wesley. I'm proud of you. I just wanted you to know that. Click. I didn't call her back. A few hours after that, my dad left one. I played it on speaker while I was soldering a test relay. Son, I owe you an apology. We should have paid more attention. I didn't know. He paused, like he was chewing glass. You've built something real. That takes guts. I respect that. Click. I sat with that one for a while. It was the closest I'd ever come to hearing my father say he was wrong. It didn't make me feel triumphant, just tired. Later that afternoon, Amelia called. Hey, she said, her voice gentle. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't mean to put you on the spot like that. I honestly didn't know. It's okay, I told her. It needed to happen. I don't think Connor's handling it well, she added after a pause. He's been different since the banquet. I could imagine. Being the golden boy for 30 years only to find out the floor wasn't yours anymore had to rattle something. Is he mad at me? I asked. She exhaled, not out loud. But he's distant. He thinks I embarrassed him. Did you? No, she said simply. I told the truth. Later that night, I scrolled through my messages again. More texts from cousins. One from Aunt Margie, saying she'd had no idea and was proud of me. Another from a guy I barely remembered from Connor's high school swim team, who DM'd me saying, man, you crushed it. Didn't know you were that Wesley Grant. The thing was, I hadn't done anything different. I'd just let them see what I'd always been doing. And now? Now they didn't know what to do with that. It felt good to finally be seen, but it also felt hollow. Because when your parents only find pride in you after a public spectacle, it's hard not to wonder if their approval is just another kind of performance. Still, I let the voicemails play all the way through, because even a late echo is still an echo, and part of me wanted to hear it. Connor picked the place. Neutral Ground, some trendy cafe downtown that sold $5 Americanos and almond flour muffins the size of hockey pucks. I got there first, took the seat by the window, and watched him walk in wearing a gray quarter-zip and mirrored sunglasses like he was reporting for duty instead of meeting his brother. He sat down without saying anything, pulled off the sunglasses, and stared at the table like it had personally offended him. I let the silence stretch a little. "Thanks for meeting me," I said finally. He didn't look up. Didn't feel like I had much of a choice. I nodded slowly. "So, I'm guessing things at home have been tense." He gave a tight shrug. "Mom's in overdrive. Dad keeps replaying that voicemail like it's a coded message." I waited, but he didn't ask about me, or Glideline, or how it felt to finally not be invisible. Just sat there, jaw clenched, like a man bracing for a punch that hadn't come yet. I sipped my coffee. "Can I ask you something?" Connor looked up, eyes guarded. "Depends. Did you know?" I asked. "About Glideline. About the work we've done. Did you already know before the banquet?" The question landed like a dropped glass, quiet, but impossible to ignore. He didn't answer right away, just exhaled through his nose and looked out the window. "I knew you had a company," he said finally. "Heard a few things. Someone at my base mentioned your name once. Said your drones were being tested by an aid group." I looked it up. I nodded. "So you knew." "I didn't know all of it," he snapped. "Not the scope, not the press, not the UN partnerships. But you knew it was real." He didn't speak, and you didn't say anything. Not to Mom, not to Dad, not to anyone. He looked at me then, and there was something raw in his expression, something that looked a lot like shame buried under ego. "I didn't think it mattered," he muttered. "No," I said calmly. "You just didn't want it to matter." That stung. He flinched slightly, like I'd peeled something back he'd been trying to keep buried. "I spent 10 years being the disappointment," I said, my voice low but steady. "And you let them believe that. You watched it happen and said nothing." "I didn't ask for them to compare us," he said quickly. "I never told them to treat you like. You didn't have to. You just benefited from it." He looked away again. "You wanted to be the one who made them proud," I said. "So when I started building something that actually mattered, you buried it. Because if they saw me differently, they might stop looking at you the same way." "That's not fair," he whispered. "No," I said. "It's just the truth." The silence between us turned heavy. Not angry, just real. Connor finally leaned back in his chair, arms crossed over his chest. "I didn't know how to handle it," he said. "I didn't expect you to become that." "I didn't become anything," I said. "You just never looked close enough to see who I already was." He looked down again. No response. When the check came, I paid it. He didn't thank me, just stood up, nodded once, and left. I sat there for a long time, finishing my coffee. It wasn't the betrayal that hurt the most. It was realizing he could have said one kind word, one honest truth, at any point. But he didn't, because keeping the spotlight meant keeping me in the shadows. We met at their house. Not mine, not a restaurant, not a family gathering. Their house. The same one I'd grown up in, where my dad kept his service medals in a glass case and my mom still used lace doilies on every surface like it was 1975. It smelled like lemon polish and silence. They were both waiting when I arrived. My mom stood near the kitchen counter, twisting a dish towel between her hands. My dad sat at the dining table, stiff and expressionless, like someone waiting for a court-martial. I didn't take off my coat. I didn't sit down. "Thank you for coming," my mom said, her voice quiet. I nodded but said nothing. "We just wanted to talk," she added. "After everything, we felt it was important." I stepped closer, but not too close. I wanted them to hear what I had to say, clearly, calmly, and without the emotional tightrope they always expected me to walk. "I'm not here for apologies," I said. "I'm not here for explanations, either. I just need to say some things, and then I'll go." They both looked at me, unsure. I took a deep breath. For most of my life, your love felt conditional, like there was a script I was supposed to follow, and the moment I stepped off, I became background noise. My mom opened her mouth, but I raised a hand to stop her. "You love Connor because he fit the image, because he followed the rules, but I was never trying to break them. I just didn't want to live by someone else's." My dad's jaw clenched. Still no words. "I built something from the ground up," I continued, "and I never once asked either of you to brag about it. I didn't need your approval. I needed your belief, and you couldn't give me that, not until it was too public to ignore." My mom's eyes were glassy now. She looked at me like she didn't know what to say. "I'm not angry," I said. "I'm just done chasing something I should have had without earning it like a report card." I paused. "Let it sink in. I don't need you to understand how venture capital works, or what Glideline's doing in sub-Saharan Africa. I just need you to respect who I am. Not because Amelia recognized me, not because an admiral made a joke that backfired, but because I'm your son." My voice cracked slightly, but I held steady. "And if you can't do that, then we need space." They both were quiet. After a long beat, my dad finally spoke. "You're right," he said. Just that, quiet, unsure, like he didn't know how to say anything else. And maybe that was enough. I turned to leave, but my mom called out softly, "Wesley." I stopped at the door. "I'm sorry we didn't see you," she said. "We should have." I gave a small nod. Then I walked out. 3 weeks later, I attended Connor and Amelia's wedding. Just another guest in a well-fitted suit. No family toast. No grand entrance. I didn't need one. Amelia greeted me like an old friend. Her parents shook my hand with genuine warmth. Even a few of Connor's Navy colleagues came up to say they'd read about Glideline. And Connor? He approached me just once, during the reception, when the music was loud and the drinks had loosened everyone's edges. He didn't say much, just met my eyes, nodded once, and said, "You clean up well." I smiled back. "So do you." We didn't need more. Later, as the sun dipped and the lights turned soft and golden, I stood near the edge of the reception tent, watching strangers dance. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't felt since I left flight school. Weightless. The lights were bright, but not harsh. Warm, purposeful, the kind designed to illuminate rather than blind. I stood at center stage, hands steady on the lectern, a quiet hum of anticipation filling the packed auditorium. Rows and rows of people, humanitarians, engineers, military logistics officers, field medics, NGO directors, all looking up at me like I had something worth saying. Turns out I did. I glanced down at the screen embedded in the podium. My first slide was cued, a map dotted with Glideline's reach. Red pins where we'd save time, blue where we'd save lives. The numbers were real. The faces were real. 5 years ago, I began, my voice calm. We launched our first unit out of a hangar near Chula Vista. We had no investors, no blueprint, and a drone assembled from hobby parts and blind optimism. A few people chuckled. I smiled. Since then, Glideline has completed over 48,000 autonomous medical deliveries. We've reached 94,000 people across 14 countries. And not a single one of those operations involved a military payload, a combat agenda, or a political campaign. I paused. We deliver hope. Period. There was silence, but not the uncomfortable kind. The kind that leans forward, that listens. I scanned the crowd and spotted familiar faces. Lena in the second row, grinning like a proud older sister. The young Kenyan nurse who flew out on her own dime to share her story later in the session. A UN logistics chief who once called our drones angels with propellers. I kept going. I talked about our newest prototypes, ones with thermal imaging for disaster rescues at night, AI-assisted mapping for avalanche victims, amphibious models being tested in the Mekong Delta. I talked about ethics, about keeping tech accountable, about why Glideline would never sell to weapons manufacturers even if the contracts were 6 figures deep. But what I didn't talk about, my family, not because they didn't matter, but because this wasn't about them. It never had been. This was the world I had built without their applause, without their guidance, without their pride. I didn't need it anymore. The applause came slowly at the end, then rose like a wave. I stepped back, nodded once, and let the sound wash over me without letting it fill me. Because the validation wasn't in the clapping. It was in the lives our work touched. In the little boy in the Philippines who got antibiotics before his fever took a dark turn. In the elderly couple in Oregon who got insulin through a blizzard when roads were shut down. In the midwife in Sierra Leone who used our drone drop to deliver her first safe birth in 3 weeks. Those were my medals. As the stage lights dimmed, I stepped into the wings and let the next speaker take the mic. Outside, the sun was setting, long streaks of orange and pink stretching across the sky like flight paths drawn in light. I walked toward the exit, no entourage, no cameras, just a quiet certainty in my step. Not flying to prove anything, just flying. Because now, I knew exactly where I was going.